Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It really depends on the place you are in this nice world. Well, you see, I came to Singapore. I've been here many times and I really love to be here. And why I came here? Because I have a nice friend. His name is Ang Tet. You can see here. He's with Magixx, and we will talk. We will be talking about this. But before we start doing our conversation, I would like to remind you that this is One Coffee with R, sponsored by Foundation Calanit, and in Spanish, Un Café con R con Fundación Calanit. So welcome, Ang Tet, to the show, and thank you very much for being here at One Coffee with R.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to talk to you as well, as like in here in this conversation.
Okay, I would like, and Aung is from Myanmar. He lives in Myanmar, but he has developed his company in Singapore. This is why, I moved to Singapore because I need to talk here locally, that in Singapore. And we will start talking about your personal journey and your misfit dynamic experience in Singapore and Myanmar. So please let us know all these details about this personal journey.
Yep. So if you look at Singapore, right, it's a very interesting country, right? Because the government supports innovation, and you have what they call Block 71, which is what they call Silicon Valley of Singapore, where a lot of startups are thriving. And they have what they call Fusionopolis, where they focus about medical startups and all these interesting innovations. And I moved to Singapore in 2006. So before that, as I look back, I would really divide my journey of professionalism into three different stages of evolution. Before Singapore, I was graduated from Myanmar in 2003, and I was electronics engineer by training. So not in Singapore that I was feeling like I was out of place, I was not belong there. Even before coming to Singapore, just coming out from my university as a graduate, a fresh graduate in electronics, I was kind of misfit then as well. Because, as I look back in 2003, the country situation was not really good. And because of the fact that we were in a situation where the university were closed down for a couple of years, our engineering curriculum was cut short. So we were really running 3 years worth of curriculum, which was supposed to be learning for 6 years. So the 6-year curriculum was cut short into 3 years. And then we had to really rush, and then we learned these things, and we got our graduation in engineering. Although the university is known as one of the top universities in Myanmar. It's called Yangon Technical University. So even then, I was a kind of a misfit, and most of the engineers, because of the fact that it took us some time to really graduate, and most of the graduates lost their interest in engineering. So some of them would become electronics engineer, not electronic engineers. Some of them would become some kind of IT professional, like network professionals, where they just build all those little computer networks. And some of the engineers would jump into programming industry, where they would become software developers. And some of the engineers just hold a degree in engineering, but they would jump into the business environment where they will start their own companies. So that's what happened when I was in Myanmar in 2003. And somehow I wanted to be an electronic engineer. I want to design all the small little circuits designs for the industry. And I was having my interest in consumer electronics. And I was looking up to those companies like Philip, Apple, all those companies. And then I was feeling like, hey, I would like to be an engineer in those companies, designing all the circuits. So that was my dream. And as I was just one out of 400 graduates from my university, although I have my good grades, right, I was feeling out of place then. And then just move forward. I was working in a company to design electronics in the industry. Most of the designers in my Myanmar, right, most of the design that they would do is just a copy. They just copy all the little circuits from all the devices from made in US or made in China. So basically, even then, when I was in 2003, all the designers in the field, they were not engineers. They were simply people who would do this out of their interest. So they didn't know much about all those designs. They simply copy these electronic circuits and they just add little bit here and there. So that was how it was done in Myanmar. And somehow I wanted to be really learning the design in the right way. I wanted to do the right kind of research validation, design verification. And I wanted to be a part of a company that really designs new products. So that was my dream. So even I was in Myanmar, I was some kind of misfit and I was feeling out of place then.
Then you
And
moved to
moving,
then you moved to Singapore.
yep, in 2006, after spending for 3 years in my industry, I designed a couple of machines which measures the weight of these um, skills and whatever. And then I also designed some kind of inverters and power supplies in Myanmar. And sometimes I would design like what you call voltage regulators in Myanmar. And then I just left Myanmar to move to Singapore. The reason was
And
because
when
I
you
wanted to, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
but when you arrived to Singapore, I mean, you saw a different type of country where they were very open to innovation, and can I think that because when you landed there, say, oh, okay, I have this is my background, but now I do have many opportunities to grow in a different way, and this is how you started. Maybe doing this. What I'm looking in your background, Genesis, Magixx, and there's another things that you were doing in Singapore before you started Magixx. Is that right?
Yep, yep. What is really interesting for me is that even when I first set foot in Singapore, because you see, I was coming from Myanmar, right? I thought Singapore was like a country where it was like heaven, right? And then all the flying cars, right? And all those like electronic devices flying around. And then I would pick those devices and sort of started doing my soldering, doing the programming in sort of firmware, whatever. So that was my expectation. And to my surprise, when I came to Singapore, I didn't find a place where they would sell these kind of electronics. The reason was because everything was transformed into digital systems. So all the designers in Singapore, they would purchase electronics components and all the other interesting things from the suppliers online. So, but I was very surprised because I thought, okay, everything will be like totally different from Myanmar. But I saw all the buildings and all the buildings were pretty much similar to Myanmar. So I was very surprised. Well, of course, there was a big difference in such a way that all the trains, the MRTs, and all the other sort of systems are pretty much different. But in terms of electronics, my expectation and my findings there were pretty much out of place. And as far as I remember, I was part of this Google group called SEI Electronics for Design. And I was asking a lot of questions there. And even then, all those people answering my questions, right? Some of the people would look down on me as someone who was coming from a developing country, and they would sometimes sort of really give me a hard time not answering my questions. And even when I was landing my first job in Singapore, I didn't get a job as an electronic designer. I was getting a job as temporary engineer in Philip. Of course, although the company was really big and like we had like 200 employees there, I was not employed directly in the Philip. I was under the business process outsource. So I was not belong there. Somehow I was able to turn it around as well. And eventually I landed a job in Rudimatic. Have you ever heard of Rudimatic in Singapore?
No, 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 no. Please let us know. Please let us know.
So you know that all the Asians, right? They have what they call rice cookers because
Yes.
in Asia, most part of Asia, right, South Asia, we eat rice as our main food. And
Yes.
Indians, they don't eat rice, right? Some of the Indians, of course, some Indians would eat rice, but some Indians would eat what they call the rotis. Or in Singapore, right, they are known as chapatis. And in English, to simplify this, basically you could call them flatbread, right? It's some kind of flatbread where you just put flour, water, and water together, and you just knead them to form a dough ball, and you just press them, and you have these nice little rotis. So that's called rudimatic. So this machine is some kind of uh, flatbread making robot, which
Okay.
knows exactly which amount of flour to put in, which amount of water and water to put into this dough ball, so that you have nice little rotis coming out from the machine, like a rice cooker. So it's some kind of a rice cooker for Indians, where you have these nice little rotis cooked by the robot for you. And we have like a machine learning programs running in the background. It's called regression. And then we also had a couple of interesting sort of devices. And there were like 9 patents in the company. So somehow, although I was feeling a misfit in this industry as a newbie, after a couple of years, I managed to land a job in Rudimatic as an electronic designer. So I designed the electronic of Rudimatic. And even then, I was still feeling like a misfit because most of the engineers there are all master degree holders and PhD holders. So I was
Oh,
the only engineer who just had a bachelor degree in electronics, no masters, no PhD. So I was the only one in this research and development field where I had no formal higher education. I would say that all those like post graduation degrees there. So I was a misfit, and somehow I managed to become an engineer there. I worked there for like at least 7 years. So I was one of the oldest employees there, and somehow I got my shares. So that was my experience back in Singapore as an engineer. So if you look back, if we look back, basically, my life can be divided into three distinct phases of evolution. The first phase was in Myanmar as an engineer, a misfit in the industry, and somehow I left Myanmar, came to Singapore, and I was still a misfit in Singapore as engineer.
okay. And let me go to the present because it's important that you do have a really nice, experience on all the issues that you have mentioned today. But let's talk about the solution and the cure. But what is Magixx? Magixx is very interesting, and I know you have too many things to let us know about this idea, and also
Exactly.
Genesis, which is in the back of your presentation.
Yep, yep. So to tell you right now what I'm doing right now, I am being part of Genesis as incubation network. So most of the time, in these days, all the companies, especially those entrepreneurs, right, they need a lot of support, right, when they are starting from their ideas phase to what they call problem solution fit, and then product market fit, and eventually when you raise funds and then becoming what we call the scaling company, right? And then of course eventually you reach your IPO where you exit your company, you sell your share at a higher price. So that was basically pretty much a norm in the industry, right? And then you have like these incubation services provided by the incubation centers. Most of the time, when you have these incubation center, you have a couple of sort of different categories of services provided by these incubation centers. The first is where you need to have what they call selection process, right? So you need to be selected by the incubation center, and at the same time, you need to select that incubation center, right? Because you need to just start your journey by first selecting the right incubator to apply for. And then the next step is where the incubator, if they think that you are the right person, they would select you as a candidate. And then, of course, again, component in incubation is where you get what they call mentorship and training. And the third component is where you also are receiving some kind of access to capital, right? In terms of software development, in terms of human resource, in terms of money, right? You just get capital. And the third item is where you also have access to the network, because most of the incubation program and all those sort of support system, they are coming with these kind of experts, right? Lying around in the network like yours, you are pretty much a very good sort of incubation sort of ecosystem where you have a lot of sort of people who talk about entrepreneurship, everything. So you have a lot of network as well. So whenever whoever is coming to your industry, right, they would have access to those kind of networks. And then the other item that you most of the time these incubation centers would provide is where infrastructure. They would provide office spaces, electricity, internet, all those things. And then basically that was common all over the world. But what really happened with this kind of incubation is that entrepreneurs are interesting people.
Yeah.
They don't follow rules, or sometimes they don't trust people. So that's pretty common, right? I mean, all I'm saying is this, right? Even if you become what they call experienced entrepreneur, you know how to leverage on these networks, you know how to leverage on these kind of resources. But as you are a newbie, right? If you sort of bring yourself back to 10 years or like 15 years, then you won't be really trusting these systems because you don't know what you don't know, and you're scared that these people, right? They would look down upon you, or you have some kind of sort of miss out of placeness, or you have a sense of not belonging to the system that you are in, and you were not able to leverage on these incubation systems around you. So that's pretty common in those kind of incubation systems. So this is what they call entropy in incubation. So
Yes.
entropy is a borrowed keyword from this physics, right? So you have like a thermodynamics, like second law of thermodynamics, and you have entropy, a measure of some kind of sort of physical property. But and that is borrowed into social science and these new sort of a little sort of complex adaptive system, complexity theory. And this entropy is a measure of the disconnectedness or the difference between the entrepreneurs and the incubation ecosystem. So it's just a feeling, right? Because we are human beings. So all those feelings are always blocking your understanding of the world around you, what they call the reality, so that sometimes you see around you, you don't see any opportunities, not because there is no opportunity, but just because of the fact that your fear, your anger, your hatred, or whatever emotions that you have, or whatever blockage, whatever mental barriers that you have, is blocking these opportunities from you. So all those opportunities are hiding in the plain sight. So what we really do, where if to link back to my third evolution phase of my journey in my life, right? So in 2018, my father passed away in Myanmar. And because of the fact that my
Okay.
father passed away, my mother was alone. So I needed to look
Sure.
after my parents. And my CEO and CTO of the company, my employers, Rudimatic, they are nice enough to allow me to sell back some of my shares to one of the investors in Singapore. And I used that money to come back to Myanmar to look after my parents. And at the same time, I used the money to start my own company as well. That was my entrepreneurial journey starting point in 2018. Of course, I started my company in Singapore in 2015 as a side project, but I managed to jump into the business wall only when I was 39. So it was 2019. So that was my starting point in entrepreneurship as an engineer. So again, I was feeling out of place in this industry because most of the business professional, right, the way they speak and the way they see business and the way they use the keywords in business, they are pretty much different from me. I was very active student in Founder Institute Singapore. I applied for
Yeah.
Founder Institute in 2015. Yes.
And how do you relate and you make the connections between Magixx, which is a totally decentralized incubation network, and what you have seen around the world? I mean, we have been talking about that these topics, days ago, and I would like you to share with the audience what do you think about how you're doing with Magixx? Because it's important to let us know this important view, which is totally different from many of the incubation network system around the world.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, right? I was an engineer by training. As I said, I jumped into the business world. So the way I see these businesses, all the startups, all those things around me, were totally unique and different. So again, as I said, the push or the sense was the misfitness or this out of place feeling, right? So that feelings allow me to really look at the world from a different point of view. So I was learning what I call the business model canvas. The reason I just learned that 9 blocks is that I wanted to use a schematic to run a business because I was an engineer. So I needed a schematic to run a business. So that was the starting point. And the reason I was talking about these journeys and these feelings and these things is that when we talk about Magixx, magic is not something we created. That's very interesting, right? Because most of the time, right, people always would think of these things from an ordered systems standpoint where you artificially make something happen. But for me, right, it happens to me naturally. Because after kind of like 2019, 18, 19, I jumped into the industry and then somehow some of the ex-colleagues who were working with me as an engineer for the past 7 years, they have become my partners in business. And then eventually I found myself as part of a network where we have 30 companies working on something interesting called Magixx. And initially we didn't know that it was Magixx. We wanted to do something interesting, and all the incubation systems we were kind of misfit in this system, so we were feeling out of place. I didn't even get any sort of investment for myself. Everything was bootstrapped. So it happened to us, and eventually, as I was active in this Web3, right, I look at interesting ideas, interesting concepts that I should really transform into Web3 protocol. And somehow I found that a lot of people have this feeling of out of place or not belonging or something. Everyone has this kind of feeling. As I asked around my peers, they all have similar experiences like me. And then eventually we just noticed that when you see this kind of sense, this kind of feelings around you, you always have a choice. You either let yourself down or you just run away from problems by simply accepting them as the negative experience, or you could always sort of have what they call a deep reflection or deep understanding of what is happening, that somehow, right, all those feelings come from the truth or the fact that there is something you truly care about. As I was an engineer in Myanmar, I care about becoming an electronics engineer by training, designing consumer electronic circuits. So that was my drive, and that was something I care about. And as I look back in the second phase of my journey, right, I wanted to be building these consumer electronic devices in Singapore, like those engineers in Philips. So that was my drive, and eventually I landed a job in Rodimatic. And when I just came back to Myanmar, to tell you the truth, right, I was really impressed by these founders in Rodimatic, where they were younger than me, but they were able to lead the company, which was like around 100 millions of valuation. So I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So those kind of things are the kind of care or the kind of interest or attention that I have on my future, the consequences of my own action. So that's the drive. So whenever you feel some sense of disconnectedness or misfitness or not belonging or out of placeness, then there always is a truth out there where there is something you care about with or without you knowing about it. So that was the
Okay,
starting point.
and how do you see? Because time is flying, and it's only 2 or 3 minutes left in the show. How do you see Magixx in the future? Because with all these connections and with people looking things, I would say upside down or from the bottom to the top, you can tell it whatever, or you can call it whatever. How do you see Magixx to as the future for entrepreneurs? Because it's a totally different view.
So, as I research about these kind of problems that we face, and as we are working together, as I said, right, Magixx is something coming from our network. So, Genesis itself is just an emergent network from of us really looking into our problems and trying to solve it in the right way. So, eventually, we see Magixx as some kind of glue that sticks together entrepreneurs and the incubators. Because today, right, the biggest problem that those incubator programs are trying to solve is where all the entrepreneurs, they were not able to leverage on these incubation networks. And for the case of the entrepreneur as well, they feel like they are not really in these networks, right? They don't feel like they belong to them. And then this is what they call trust issue, right? And then Magic will act as some kind of social practice that increases the engagement between these incubator programs and these entrepreneurs so that you have better ecosystem. So we are trying to just use that Magixx in reality in such a way that we have a platform called Genesis Nexus, which is a hub where we stitch together those incubation networks and entrepreneurs by simply creating some kind of super customized venture studios, which means that the kind of studios or the kind of resources pull from the network just for you alone as entrepreneur. How do you do that?
Okay.
Very simple. There's some kind of sort of a Web3 protocol that allows you to stitch together by using NFT as a base, and then you just use NFT and you just use what they call blockchain as a transparent system to really stitch together those things, and you just create all those things in the form of IOUs or the deals, so that
Okay.
it's very transparent so that your investors can really look at these things. And that's how we are sort of seeing Magixx as a protocol that really helps incubation networks like Genesis Value Network to thrive. So this is not just for our network, but for any kind of network which really would like to increase the what they call embeddedness of these entrepreneurs in their context. They could leverage on Web3, and then they could use our platform as a base to really establish their own kind of sort of thing. So we are open sourcing everything, which means that we are not putting everything in Genesis. Anyone can copy that. Anyone can use that for their leverage. And eventually, if they are interested in that, we just cross-connect each other. And this is where we can form what they call a universe of mindful care called Magixx Paraforce.
Okay. And after all this information, where people can find you?
Basically, I
You have
can
an
we
email
always
address.
yeah. Basically, you can look for this word called Genesis, right? Magixx Genesis Value Network in LinkedIn, and then you can always look at all the white papers that we have, all the interesting articles, all the videos, all the training, all the books that we are publishing, and from that you can also use the chat in the LinkedIn so that you can reach any of us, because Genesis is not me; it's a network where I am
Yes.
just part of the value network of peers. So anyone can really come and Genesis and ask for these kind of things for free. At the same time, if you are active sort of pursuer of Web3 or NFTs, you can also get what they call free NFT airdrop from Genesis, because we are experimenting by representing all those custom venture studio in the form of the NFTs through our platform called Genesis Nexus, which is a hub that cross connects all the venture studios for all the individuals in the network. So please
My last
feel free to
question.
look for me.
My last question. What do you prefer, rice or roti?
Sorry again.
What do you prefer, rice? What do you prefer, rice or roti?
For me, I prefer rice, but of course, I was a very active eater of rotis, because in Rudimatic, we need to test around 7,000 rotis for each device. So there were a lot of rotis made by the device where we had a lot of sort of food to eat. So I was, of course, I'm originally the rice eater, but I also love to eat roti as well. Thank you so much
Okay.
for
Well,
asking.
I'm Ted, Maxis, and this wonderful experience. Well, thank you very much to coming to One Coffee with R. And I would like to invite all our audience to a new interesting podcast that we will have very soon. Thank you very much, and take care. Bye bye.
Thank you so much for giving me a chance to talk to you. Bye bye.